Welcome to Inkwell Spoken Presents Common Genius, Uncommon Destiny. I am your host, Reggie Key, and today I have a special guest. I have Myles Kenner with me. Myles, thank you for being on the show, my fellow Suitland High School alumni.
Absolutely, absolutely. Hey,
Right here, the Rams.
class of 2011.
2011, and now you just, all right, now I need a moment of silence because you're making me feel old. Because do you remember, you don't remember, I came out in 96. You're making me feel ancient right now, but that's cool though. It's funny because you had to, it came out by accident on Facebook that I forgot that you went to Suitland. But I know that's one of the main reasons why we connected. There's a couple of reasons why we would have connected when you were a student at Columbia College and I was a financial aid advisor, but I know that came out and that was one of the things that bonded us and allowed us to stay connected all these many years later. So it's been good to continue to see you on Facebook. It's good to kind of catch up with you face to face, so to speak, over this particular forum. And I want to thank you for coming on the show, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the invite.
Yes, sir. So, I am very particular with who I invite on the show. It'll be, a lot of times it'll be somebody who I have intimate knowledge of. And the other times it'll be somebody I see something on Facebook and I'm like, yeah, I see something in you that I want to like tease out and make sure that you understand like what it is that you're operating in. And you're one of those guys, you're kind of a blend between the two. So I feel like this is going to be a good interview. All right.
Got you. Cool.
Ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. So Myles, my first question for you is this. Do you consider yourself to be a genius?
Oof. I feel like I have some genius qualities.
Okay.
The reason why I say that is like sometimes I'll find myself doing something. I'm like, dang, I wonder if this comes easy to others like it does to me. And then I'll just, skip past it and just continue what I'm doing. But other times, I can be crippled with self-doubt. So that can kind of, overshadow that genius. So
yeah.
Yeah.
I think all of us have that self-doubt. All of us see these moments, these shimmering moments, but we allow the machinations of the world to kind of like press us down a little bit. And what I'm all about doing in this interview for you and whoever else comes on is we need to understand the importance of self-affirmation. Because especially for us as African-American males, we'll go out into the world and the world will see us and the world will tell us who we are without any regard to what's on the inside of us. And if we don't know who we are, if we don't know, hey, outside of the fact that your name is Myles Kenner, outside of the fact that you hailed from Suitland High School, there are some tenable things that you need to know about yourself so that when other people try to put a label on you that's less than what you are and who you are, you won't accept them. And I don't think that we do that enough as African-American males. There's the extreme opposite end of that what we see in hip hop, where you got all this braggadocious, like, everything is this, but that's more of an affront and it's more of an exaggeration. I want us to have a more even-keeled approach to who we are as it relates to how we interact with the world. So my follow-up question for you is this, though. When you think of this word genius, who's the first person that comes to mind?
I feel like Albert Einstein is the first one that comes to mind. That's a very well-known, genius. Stephen Hawking, those types of guys. There's only a few people that I know personally that I would consider a genius. I'm not going to say the names, but I've only probably met only one or two that I consider a genius.
All right. So you've given, just so you know, your first two answers are very typical. Most people, aren't that confident to say like, hey, I'm a genius. And I understand that. I'm like that too, prior to this revelation that I've had in this book that I've written. And then when I asked the follow-up question, Albert Einstein is the number one answer. And I'm not trying to take anything away from Einstein, but there's something very important that's happening when the majority of us ascribe genius to Einstein. nobody ever explicitly told us, hey, Einstein is a genius. It's something that's just kind of out there. It's just in the air that we know to attribute genius to him. But what's
Right.
also in the air when we do that, when we attribute genius to him, when we put him on this pedestal, when we put him on this pedestal, we also put this genius on the pedestal that's out of reach for us, and we disassociate it from ourselves,
Mm.
and because we don't look like him. Like it's something that I've discovered that's very important in doing these one-on-one interviews. The people who did say, yeah, I'm a genius, one, they're creative. So most of the time they're creative people. And then two, when I ask them who they consider geniuses, it's always somebody that's local, that they can relate to, that they look like. Like I've had people say, my mom, my dad, my child. And I'm like,
Mm.
okay, this makes sense then, that when I ask you if you're a genius, you're like, yeah, because you've associated to someone that looks like you, that you can identify and relate with. And so this association, I'm here to close the gap,
Okay.
because Einstein was only one type of genius. And I think we fail to really focus on that a lot. We make it this catch-all, like he was a genius in all things. Like Einstein, actually, Miles, I don't know if you know a little bit about his background, but when he was growing up and going to secondary school, you know anything about him?
No, not I. No. Mm-mm.
All right, so I saw you shaking your head. I just wanted to make sure, like maybe some every once in a while I come across somebody that knows this story. But
I
bro,
thought that he might have had Asperger's when he was growing up. But that might I'm thinking about somebody else. But
I don't
yeah.
know if it was Asperger's, but he got his parents got a note home and purportedly read it in front of him. His teachers was like, yeah, you might want to make sure Einstein work with his hands because he not that bright.
Mm.
His thinking pattern was different than what the school system of his day and even the school system now does this to people. He was being marginalized because he wasn't fitting into the boxes that the school needed him to fit into and how they were teaching him. And so they, instead of trying to figure out how he learns, they just, wrote him off and was like, yeah, this future genius that we're going to set a standard by, he was initially told like, yeah, you don't have it. And even when he got to college, like the way he thought was outside of these professors, was like they would kick him out of his classroom. Like, dude, get out of our class, dude. Like he would be focused. He would be like focusing on the window, looking outside at the clouds, and the teachers would think that he was not paying attention. When what
Mm.
was really going on, Miles, he was figuring out like what would it look like to ride a beam of light from the sun to the earth. And in doing that, and in doing these thought experiments, is what he did. He called them thought experiments. That's how he came up with the theory of relativity.
Mm.
But we don't learn about thought experiments in school. Like we're taught in a very regimented way, and we have a very regimented approach on how to be educated. When there's so much more to your education than what we're being exposed to in school. And so I'm going to kind of break that down over the course of our time together today. But I do have this quote that I want to run by you that purportedly comes from Einstein that I think will really crack open where we're about to go. So you ready for the quote?
Yeah, yeah.
Let me know if you've heard this quote before, and then let me know how it hits you, like how you internalize it. All right, here it goes. If you judge a fish by how well it can climb a tree, it'll spend its entire life thinking it's stupid.
Yeah. I've definitely heard that one before.
All right.
And definitely heard that a lot before growing up, especially when well, especially now that everybody's like really vocal about um, you know, especially in the school system, everybody's vocal about like, hey, every child is different. Every child learns uh differently. Nobody's the same. There's no formula to teaching a kid a certain way. You know what
Mhm.
I'm saying? So that's where I hear it mostly. But yeah, it's so true. You know, I, me personally, uh, I was born with the name Miles. Named after Miles Davis,
Okay.
uh, famous jazz musician.
Mhm.
And growing up, I guess I kind of thought that, hey, I'm supposed to do music.
Mhm.
I'm a I enjoy music. I love music. I love playing jazz. I love that's what I went to school for. I was in the visual performing arts at Suitland for music.
Yep.
I went on to college to do music, but I never really felt like, you know, I was personally good at it. I've had my moments, yes, but I never thought that I was good at it. And it wasn't until I graduated college, taught for a little bit, and started living, like really being an adult, that I realized, hey, maybe it's not that I wasn't good at it, but that just really wasn't my passion. And my passion has changed a lot. So my whole mentality changed once I learned, like, hey, it's okay that you didn't, you know, excel as well as you did in music. And it's okay that you found a new passion that you're really, really good at,
Yeah, yeah.
and they're selling that. So yeah, that's kind of what it reminds me of.
Yeah, that's good though, because you heard me say earlier, one of the first labels that you have, you know your name. And I've never had anyone come on the show and say, hey, look, basically, the first label that I was given, my name, put this kind of expectation on me that I'm just now realizing that ain't me though. Like
Right.
this Miles Davis, you felt like you had to live up to this great man's uh his, what I want to call it, his not his experience, but his reputation as this great musician, right? And it's the same way with like comparing ourselves to Einstein. The way Miles Davis thought is not the way that you necessarily thought. But
Hmm.
when you get this great mantle put on you, you're like, man, I guess I got to live up to this. And that can really suppress who you really are if you're not careful. Because it seems like a good thing to aspire towards. Hey, I want to be like Miles Davis. Do you have musicians in your life? Like were your parents, active in music?
My dad was an active listener, but
Okay.
nobody's like a real musician. Yeah, I feel
Yeah,
like if my dad took lessons, he'd be great at it. He would have been like the best, to
gotcha.
be honest with you.
And there's a lot of stuff that's on the inside of us that we're unaware of, and we need to like really sit down and take some inventory and have some conversations with our relatives, our forefathers, and things like that if they're still around, uncles, aunts, whomever, and just figure out what talent, because talent is generational. Talent is something we observe this in entertainers and in athletes, but then we fail to see it in ourselves. We'll look at somebody, a family like the Jacksons, or who were we talking about the other day? The Winans, and we're like, well, that's a that's
Yeah.
a that's a musical family, and we'll see that, like that makes sense.
Hmm.
Children are coming out, they're
Hmm.
musicians, they're singers, this and the third. We'll look at somebody like Kobe. Like Kobe's father was a basketball player. We see Shaq coming out. Not well, Shaq and his son. But what I meant to
Hmm.
say was Kobe. Not Kobe, but my fault.
LeBron and
LeBron,
his son.
LeBron James
Hmm.
and Bronny coming out. We're like, well, that makes sense. Like their fathers were in this thing, and so they've been trained up. But we got to understand that there's something on the inside of us that's trying to break free to the surface, that's been passed down to us from generations before us, that we have access to, and that if we're careful with it, we can begin to understand what our genius is. Now, I want to backtrack for a second, because one of the earliest things that you said to me, you were like, yeah, I have my moments. And in truth, genius comes in moments. It's not somebody that's a genius is not somebody who excels at everything. That's not what genius is. One of my earliest interviewers down here in South Carolina, he told me, and we become really fast friends. He was like, yo, I got zeros and nines. He's a really good cook. You know how to, any meat you get at him, he gonna know how to put it on this grill and bring some flavor out of it, right? He was like, I give myself zeros and nines. He was like, the places that he said, I'm a nine when it comes to grilling this food and cooking. He said, I never give myself a 10 because then I'll get complacent and I think I have nothing else to learn. So he's like, I always try and keep myself hungry and rate myself at a nine. But he's like, I got zeros in other areas though. I got places in my life where I'm not good. He said, I'm cool
Right.
with it though. And I think that understanding your genius is becoming cool with zeros and nines. Like I'm not good at that, but I excel at this, and that's okay. I'm not supposed to excel at everything. That gets into like this megalomaniac Kanye level genius where you're like, I gotta do everything. Everything I touch is gonna be dope. And it's like,
Right.
man,
Yeah.
like you gotta have some parameters and give yourself some limitations. It's really all about knowing your element. So getting back to this quote, I know the last 3 years have been really crazy with COVID. but there's some basic things. The world is broken. Would you agree that the world is broken?
Absolutely.
But not everything is broken though. So a fish out of water, like there's some things that still work like they're supposed to. Fish thrive in water, right?
Hmm.
Like I haven't done an Einstein and looked out the window and seen a fish in a tree. If I see a fish in a tree, Miles, I know it's time to get off the planet. If I see a fish excelling at climbing trees, I know something's completely wrong with the planet and it's time to leave. But that's not what I'm seeing. Like everybody knows that fish belong in water. That's their element. They have fins, scales, gills, and they're even designed streamlined to function well in water. That is a fish's genius, right? To excel, to thrive in the water, to spend its entire life in water. But when you take that fish out of its element, you're going to see that fish struggle.
Hmm.
The problem with seeing a fish out of water struggle is when you try to normalize it and be like, well, yeah, that's what you're supposed to be out of water. You're supposed to, matter of fact, go climb this tree. Like, go try and do what, you know, in this quote, I always envision Einstein as a bear in this meta, and it becomes a metaphor too, because Einstein as a bear, he climbs trees. That's what he does. He was built to climb trees. His tree is physics, right? He had a
Right.
physics mind. That's what he was put on this planet to do. But if you go, if we as fish try to look at Einstein and climb a tree as he does, what's going to happen?
It ain't gonna work.
It's not beyond it not just working, Miles. If a fish stays out of water for too long, what's going to
It's
happen?
gonna die.
Die, right? And I feel like I've been put on this planet to identify dying genius around me for the purpose of revitalizing, resuscitating, and resurrecting it. Because we have too many people that are out of their element, but are trying to judge. Most of the time, it's us judging ourselves and being like, yeah, I don't measure up. But really, in truth, a lot of times that judgment that we put on ourselves comes from this conditioning that we have where somebody else, as African-American males, remember I'm telling you, somebody else coming along and saying like, hey, yeah, you do this. Like I'm 6'1", 6'2" on a good day, right? So people like to tell me, I had this woman tell me just last week, I was back in Illinois and I was talking to some young men, and it made me feel so it made me feel really, I'm used to it, but it still caught me off guard. Out of nowhere, this white woman is like, Reggie, did you play basketball? It's like, nah, I didn't. I mean, I played recreationally, but she made an assumption in that moment. Even when the school that I went to, I got a scholarship to go to University of Delaware, and when I went to go receive my scholarship, and so we were at this reception. Everybody that's in this reception, every student has a scholarship. It's known.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody comes up to me and it's like, hey, football, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, actually, computer engineering. I'm here for merit. I'm here for my grades. And I just watched their mind kind of just implode. And I was like, yeah, pick your lip up off the ground and just don't put this label, don't put these assumptions on me, right?
Right.
And there's a lot of assumptions that get put on us because what people do, and everybody has prejudice, but it's when you begin to act out your prejudice on a person. Like you see a person and you judge them. We all do it. That's what prejudice is, prejudging a person, right? But when you begin to engage them, you got to like put your judgments to the side and say, oh, okay, let me see this person for who they are versus who I need them to be to make my world make sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so when people do that, and I always see like there's somebody right off camera at this tree with its fishes at the root, and they're just telling this fish like, you ain't climbed this tree yet? Why you ain't climbing? I need you to climb this tree. And this fish begins to be conditioned to, I guess I got to climb this tree then, because the fish has forgotten what their element is and who they are.
Right.
I'm trying to put the fish back in the water, Miles.
Man, I love that analogy.
Yeah, it's been powerful, man. I've had some really great conversations that open up from this analogy, metaphor, quote. So from there, here's where I want to go. I want to identify your element, right? And the element that we all operate in is defined according to how it was given to me in this book that I wrote. It's according to your passion. We already talked about talent because I'm gonna unlock genius for you in 3 components. It's a 3-part equation. All right.
Okay.
Passion, that defines your element. We're gonna get into that in a second. Talent and purpose.
Gotcha.
And so I'm telling you that if we can identify your passion, talent, and purpose, we can unlock your genius. And more than likely, you're already dabbling in it.
Mm. Okay.
That's something you're interested in
I'm
figuring
fired
out?
up. I'm fired up. This Loki something I've been thinking about for a while. It's interesting that you bring it up because like I was saying earlier, like, after graduating school and having like uh no expectations put on me, no deadlines and stuff, I really got a chance to sit down and be like, man, all right, I already figured out, not figured out, but I already feel like, music isn't my passion.
Mhm.
I may be good at it, and started exploring a lot of other things that that I really love to do. So yeah, I'm fired up about this conversation.
That's what's up. All right, so let's get to this passion part. So just like I asked you, what or who comes to mind when you hear the word genius? What comes to mind when you hear this word passion? What words come to mind?
Um, just my passions or just anything
Just
that comes to
generically.
mind.
Well, whatever, man. Like just whether it's generic or whether it's specific to you, either way is good.
For me, I'm really passionate about technology. It's something that I really started to dive into these last couple years after I kind of put music to the wayside.
Mhm.
I'm really just interested in technology, how it works, the ones and zeros under the hood, programming, coding, um, telecommunications, all that types of stuff. So yeah, I just really am intrigued by technology. I built my first computer a couple years
Sure.
ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
is really dope. And just from that alone, I'm just like, man, that's crazy. It's like to me, I'm just like, all right. At first, I thought it was like extremely difficult, but like I'm like, man, I'm really determined to you know, to do this because I'm interested in it. And
Yeah.
after learning and studying and I never thought I'd be studying outside of school, but like, man, I'm like, man, something that I love. I'm trying to learn how to do it.
Yo, the best studying comes outside of school. I tell people all the time, I love biology. Just don't put me in a class.
Right.
Like once you start putting the pressure of I gotta get a grade for this, then
Right.
it's like my daughter like right now. We're on vacation, right? And I have to get on her every day about her room. I've stopped because I'm like, you know what? Like your room is gonna be it's not a hot mess, but like I tell her, like, hey, make your bed. But during vacation, I'm like, hey, you don't gotta make your bed. Like it's okay, it's fine. The first thing the first day of vacation when I walked into her room ain't never looked cleaner. Like you made your bed. She was like, yeah, man, when you don't put the pressure on me, it just feels different. I'm like, seriously though, like that's rebellion. But that's a whole nother thing. But there's something about not having that added pressure that allows you to explore a thing openly without this, oh, I have to do this for a grade. I have to do this for, whatever. So I
Right.
get that. I thought I wanted to be a computer programmer. That's why I majored in computer engineering. But I'm not going, I'm not, I don't, you clearly can talk to us more about computers now than I probably could even in my prime.
Oh
I
man.
lasted like 2 years outside of college when I graduated, and I went into telecommunications, Lucent Technologies. You probably don't remember that company,
Mm.
but it wasn't my thing. It really, I did a cash grab. I was like, what can I do that makes money? I like math,
Right.
and engineers make money, so that's how I chose my major. And I'm trying to, get out there and get in front of some people, some youth, and say, hey, look, don't focus. If you can figure out your genius through this equation, then you're going to figure out what your major should be, if you should even need to go to college. That's the discussion that I'm having now.
Right.
So my question for you, how did you come across this? I'm interested to see like how you became drawn to computers.
Oh man, it was oof. So I had taught after I got out of college, I had taught at this school for about 4 months.
Mhm.
I taught music, um, you know, but they shut the music program down. And I had been also doing sound for my church. So literally the only thing that I had on my resume was, being the audiovisual technician at my church and music.
Mhm.
And I literally just took a just leap of faith applying for audiovisual technician jobs because I'm like, man, I need to make money, I need to eat, can't
Yeah.
be on the streets, you know. And by this time, I already figured out that music was something I didn't want to do. Like, I'm just like, all right, it's time for me to explore myself for real. And so um, it opened up a whole new world to me, like technology. I would say I didn't know a lick about anything when this guy took me on for a job being an audiovisual technician for corporate America. I knew nothing, so I had to learn extremely quick. And
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
best way to do that is through YouTube. So I'm looking at all these YouTube videos. I'm like, man, what is a HDMI connector? Like, what is a projector? Like, how do you work a projector? How do you do a WebEx or Zoom or whatever was out there at the time? Like, you know, so I'm just researching so I can be good at my job,
Right.
so I don't get fired. So, um, and I would say that's the first time I really like studied something,
Hmm.
like really studied something. And I had never done that in school because in school everything just came easy to me. I didn't have to study for anything, barely had to do homework. I didn't
Yeah.
have to do jack. So this is the first time I really studied something. And it was just a rabbit hole of a lot, like PC building,
Mhm.
web development, programming, coding, stuff like that. And it almost is like I got unplugged for the matrix. I'm like, yo, all this stuff existed.
Yeah.
What is this? This was 20 this was 2015, 2016.
All right.
So about 7 years ago. And man, I just delve in it. Like I even took a couple classes at Northwestern for web development and coding, sort of certified web developer. Um, you know, started doing all this stuff and just getting the basics down. And then once I really learned what I could really do, that's when I delve even deeper, you know, literally with just YouTube. Literally with just YouTube. So, you know, everything that I saw that, you know, pertained to it, I tried it, you know, whether it's building a computer, whether it's building home automation, whether it's anything, I tried it. Whether I knew I was gonna like it or not, I just tried it. So yeah, that transition between music and the real professional world, that was my rabbit hole. So
So here's an interesting question for you. This is going to get us into the core of passion because I'm going to redefine passion for you. If it's okay,
okay,
I'm not trying to take away what you just said, but I'm going to redefine passion in a very unique way that you probably
okay.
haven't heard of before. And I'm going to tell you where I got the source from. Before I ask that, would you say that there was something like what had you in the AV booth at your church? Was it something where you heard the music and as a person who was dabbling in musicianship, you were like, that don't sound right. Like, yeah, we need to do better. Our sound quality is trash. Like, was it that type of experience? How did you get into the booth?
So I got into the booth because one, yes, as a musician, I'm like, oh, this would be good to know if I'm ever gigging and I need to, you know, set up my own equipment. They don't have a sound guy. I can get paid for both.
I got
Two, two, there was a huge need at the church at the time because there was only one guy running it, and I was just like, yeah, he needs help, and you know, let me try to help out as much as I can. So, you know, he took me under his wing, and yeah, those two things were pretty much it.
okay. I had a feeling too when you began to talk about music. What I didn't ask you at the onset is like, were you in on the production side? And when I saw production, I kind of saw you in front of a soundboard doing your thing. So that kind of validates.
Mhm.
So that's kind of cool. Now
Yeah.
look, I'm a shift gears on you. All right. So most of the time when I ask people about passion, when they identify it generically, they say words like, drive. Um, I've heard people say like it's the gas in your tank. Like when you figure out what your passion is, it's the thing that fuels you. And it's the thing that drives you such that you don't care what obstacle you encounter. You don't care how big a thing is that's in your way. You're going to go through it, around it, over it, under it, whatever. You're like, yo, I cannot be stopped once you tap into this. Like once if you think about a fish in water, like there's nothing that can get into a fish's way that they can't circumvent most of the time because it's so fluid in this water, right? And so the passion defines your element. What I typically end up hearing from youth when I say this word passion, it's like love. This word comes around. And I'm like, yeah, let's spend some time right there, because actually what I want to do is focus on the opposite end of the spectrum when it talks as it relates to love. Like, so when I get into passion, Miles, I don't talk about doing what you love, figuring out what you love. I actually say you should focus on what you hate. And I can't take credit for this. Just like I'm focusing on genius, first of all, time out. I got the concept for genius being common from this dude named Bruce George, right? He's a guy in New York. He's been doing some things for a while, dabbling in the Def Poetry Jam type era. And I connected with him through that commonality because, I write poetry. And a couple of years ago, I was like, yo, what you doing these days, man? He said, I got this movement that I started, man, called Genius is Common, where I want to remove the elitism that's been attached to this word and make it accessible to everybody. And he was like, you out in the Midwest, just spread the word however you can. And then this came to me, right? But it came to me in parts because I read this book one time called The Assignment by Mike Murdock. And Mike Murdock said that, hey, look, if you want to figure out what your assignment is, you need to focus on what your Popeye moment is. I don't know. Did you watch? Is that
Popeye? Yeah, I know Popeye. Yeah,
okay.
I know
Popeye.
Popeye.
I can't make no assumptions. I can make it. Look, dude, I kid you not. Pause. Just another pause, man. We had a family over at our house. The same dude, Kier, who I told you, he had the zeros and nines. It was real close. So his family was over here. We was just chopping it up, just hanging out on Monday, and we played this game called Lyrically Correct. And this lyric came up. It was a rap lyric, and it was from DMX. And his son was like, "Who is DMX?"
Oh,
he said,
no, R.I.P.
No, like it wasn't even that. I'm like, oh, that's disrespectful because he's like dead now. You don't know. I felt disrespected. I was like, dude, you making me old. To me, he's a relatively new. I don't deal with this new age hip hop now because it's trash to me. So my last true era of hip hop was like DMX, Jay-Z. So for him to say like, and he's like a freshman in college, Miles. He's like, yeah, who is DMX?
Oh no.
I couldn't wrap my mind around that. Anyways, let me bring it back. So he says what your Popeye moment is. He was like, when Popeye got fed up, when he was getting beat up by Bluto, when Bluto stole his girl and he was at his wit's end and he couldn't do anything else, he would pull out this can of spinach. And he'd be like, I've had all I can stand. I can't stand no more. And he was like, what is that moment for you? You got to identify what this moment is, because once you identify that moment, the thing that you hate, because we talked about the earth being broken briefly earlier, right? The brokenness of the world afflicts and affects each of us in different ways. And in fact, what it does is it traumatizes us. And when we get traumatized by the brokenness of the world, and we begin to, as we get older and we deal with that trauma, and we be like, man, I really hate that I went through that. What happens is when that thing that traumatizes us is still operating and we see it hurting and afflicting other people, we be like, oh, I hate that though. And we'll start to say things now, it's like, somebody should do something about that. You find yourself constantly being like, when you see it, if you constantly are talking about it and saying somebody should do something about that, guess who the somebody is?
Us.
That thing that you hate seeing operate, and notice I said thing, not a person. We're not talking about hating people at all. We're talking about hating a thing that has traumatized you and being like, somebody need to do something about it. And that somebody, like I said, is you. So that's what he's saying. Like, your assignment in this world is centered around this thing that you hate, because you're meant to address it. And it gets into this answer, sometimes we're like, why did I go through that? A lot of times, Miles, the things that we go through, the hurtful things that we go through in life aren't just for our own betterment. They're for someone else's betterment. Because when we see a person trapped in a thing or affected by a thing that's affected us, and we're like managing it, or we've gotten past it, we're like, hey, look, I can recognize how this is hurting you, and I can recognize some things to do to get you out of it though, because I've gotten out of it. And so that gives a person drive. It's most of the time, Miles, the thing that we're talking about is never a small thing. It's something large. It's something systemic, right? It creates in our lives a David and Goliath moment. Like when David saw this giant, everybody else was cowering. David was like, yo, like, somebody gonna do, y'all not gonna do nothing? How long has he been out here talking smack? Who is he? He's talking about our God like that, and y'all not doing nothing. He was like, I got you. Just like, give me my
Mhm.
slingshot. He was like, I'm gonna do something. I'm gonna take this dude's head off today. He didn't cower. He didn't run away. He ran towards this thing that was not just affecting him, but affecting his whole family, affecting
Right.
his people, disrespecting the God that he served. He was like, nah, I'm about to do something about that today. Because he's like, look, I've been fighting bears and lions, guarding my dad's sheep. I know how to deal with bullies. I know how to deal with something that is larger than you, something that's more ferocious than you, though, but I know how to get at it, though, and win. And he went at it. And we know the story. We know how that turned out.
Yep. Yep.
So my question to you, Miles, is this. My next question for you, rather. What do you hate?
Man, I appreciate the light that you put that. Because one thing I really hate,
Okay, let's get it.
um, one thing I really hate is just I don't even know how to put this. Um, I really hate injustice. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the things that I've been through in my life, I feel like is sort of because, not sort of because, but is because of the systems that I put in place to, you know, hold a certain demographic back from succeeding.
Yep.
And for me, that's the healthcare system. I've had diabetes for about 21 years,
Okay.
right? And having access to the knowledge as well as medications and these things have been um, something that I've been victim to for 21 years. Out of the 21 years that I've had diabetes, I didn't start learning about what diabetes really was, how to fight it, or even having health insurance until about three
Right.
years ago.
Yeah.
You know, and just learning now about the things that go on in your body when it's left unchecked is scary to me. Like I literally shouldn't be alive right now. I literally shouldn't be alive. And there are countless others who, you know, because I've went and, done my research, I've gotten gotten health insurance through my job. I've gotten access to uh, certain medications and devices that have really, really turned my diabetes around. Like
Mhm.
really turned my diabetes around. I would consider myself blessed because one, they were extremely expensive, and two, I feel like, you know, the fact that I learned about it when I did, really literally saved my life.
Yeah.
But there are so many people that don't have that access to knowledge, access to the medications and stuff like that because of what happens. Like I tell my wife all the time, I joke around with her. I'm like, baby, we gotta eat better because we both can't afford to have diabetes. We both can't afford to have diabetes. This is not a good time when insulin is, thousands% above what it really costs to make. And, these, higher ups are making money hand over fist by these pharmaceutical companies and stuff like that. And, I just get really heated because I'm like, man, like, why are people so greedy?
That's what
you
it is.
know,
There's
right,
so many elements to this very preventable disease
right,
that are manageable, but because of lack of information, lack of resources, and like you said, I mean, you've I'm not going to reiterate what you just said. I completely understand what you're saying, but you have been positioned in such a way where you've come out of it. You've come out of it more than the average person has, and been like, oh snap, like okay, I know now, I'm informed now what I can do to understand how my body functions and to know how to work this system and to get access. That's the main thing. That's the big word right there is access.
hmm,
So that this is manageable and it doesn't take me out unnecessarily. There's too many people dying from diabetes that shouldn't be dying.
right, hmm,
Right. So okay, I get that. All right. So this is now we're starting to get into something. Right. So what happened? This is where we got to be very careful because I'm gonna go back to David and Goliath at that school.
okay,
What happened with David and Goliath? Once David said, hey, look, I'll kill him. I'll go out and fight this giant. King Saul says, hey, go take my armor. Now, David was like a little kid.
right. The youngest of the least.
He was the youngest, right? He was like a teenager. Saul was a grown man. He was like, hey, take my armor and go fight him. And David was like, nah, I'm not
Right.
doing that.
I can't move in
because he
this. I
knew
can't fight in this.
I can't fight in this. If I go out here, I'm not gonna be able to move and I am gonna die. Right? He's like, nah,
Hmm.
give me my slingshot. That's what I use to kill these bears and lions, guard my daddy's sheep. Give me my slingshot and 5 smooth stones. That's all I need. You doing the most. And this is a callback to this fish though, because people will look at us and be like, hey, look, this is what you need to do to be successful at this. And be like, is it though? And if you don't know, like what's on the inside of you, because now we transition, Miles, we transition from passion to talent. Your talent, Miles, is your tool that you've been given, that's been passed on from generation to generation to address the thing that's broken in the world that revolves around your passion, or that your passion revolves around. You get that?
Hmm.
Your
Yeah.
talent, T for tool. David was like, give me the right tool and I can
Right.
use my passion correctly. He was like, I hate
Mm.
this giant over here talking smack about my God. Like, nah, I'm not going to tolerate that. I'm going to do something about it. And so that becomes the important piece, like identifying what your talent is that you can then use to address and begin to dismantle this issue of access to information about diabetes that you say like that heat, that gets you heated though.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in truth, we're going to fast forward down to the last component. Your purpose in life is really simple. I mean, this stuff always is simple, but it's a little more complex. But your purpose in life, Miles, is to identify your talent, your generational talent, and use it as a tool to address your passion, the thing that you've been put on this planet to address, the thing that's your element that you identify by the thing that you hate. When you combine that together, you unlock your genius. And you'll operate in it at such a level where you don't care if somebody pays you for it or not. Now, I
Mm.
don't care if you pay me for this. I need to address this. Eventually, though, you'll address it with such passion because you address it. You ever heard the quote, like, I hate that with a passion?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Address it with such conviction that somebody will like, hey, man, can you come talk to these people about this? Can you come do this? Can you come do X, Y, and Z? We'll pay you for it. But that's not your motivation, though. Your motivation, you're driven by like, yo, as long as this thing exists on the planet and I see somebody affected by it, and I know I have empathy for this person because I went through this, I'm gonna do something about it. I'm going to speak on it. I'm going to act on it. I'm gonna do something with what I've been given.
Mm.
So I got a story for you. All right. This is
Cool.
beyond
Cool.
metaphor. This is beyond a quote. This is an actual story that plays out what we just talked about to a T, I believe. All right.
Okay.
So I was asked by a principal to come to this school. It was an elementary school. And she was like, hey, look, I got these 10 little boys, 10 minority boys, and they're struggling. And I just need somebody to come talk to them that they can identify with. So I was like, all right, bet I'll come. I was workshopping this whole genius thing. So I was like, I'll come talk to them. And I was able to like have access to them like every Friday for like the entire school year. And so I came in, and one of the first things I said to them was, I was like, hey, first of all, they were 10 boys, but they were in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. 3 grades, 1 class all day.
Jesus. What?
Exactly. Something's not right. Right. What I found out was they were on IEPs, individual education plans, what we would have called special ed back in the day. So I
Hmm.
came in and I'm looking at them, I'm just observing them playing, seeing whatever. And they are rambunctious. They are a feisty group of young boys, right? So one of the first things I said to them, I was like, hey, you're a genius. Did you know that? And they looked at me like, dude, who are you talking to? Like one of them got offended. He was like, don't call me that.
Oh
And
wow.
they had gotten so used to negative affirmations. You have ADD, you have ADHD, you are disruptive, you're emotionally imbalanced, you got to take medication for this, that, and the third. They were so used to negative labels that when I came with a positive label, they kind of had this like, oh, whoa, what you doing? And then they was even looking at me like, bro, I think you're in the wrong class. I think you went to the wrong place because that's not anybody in here. And so I said, all right, I understand. So I let it go. I said, all right, this is why I posed the second question and how I posed it. I said, all right, tell me what you hate. And they had a lot to say about that. They was like, oh, really? Like you want to, they kind of looked around like, this is what you want to do? I was like, yeah, tell me what you hate. Now, Miles, these little boys that can never agree on anything, they will always fight, fuss, and argue about what to play, when to play, whose seat was whose, whatever. They can never agree on anything, but they all universally told me the same thing. They hated the same thing. The same thing that was marginalizing them, the same thing that was stigmatizing them, the same thing that was traumatizing them, they could identify it as school.
Mm.
We hate school, Mr. Key. Now what? They just looked at me like, yeah. You didn't expect us to say that, did you? I said, actually, that doesn't surprise me at all. And I said, so if you accept my definition that the thing that you were put on this planet to fix is the thing that you hate, then you telling me that you all universally hate school, you're telling me you're future educators.
Mm.
And it was like, oh, what? And they kind of started bouncing. No, why are you backing up though? Like, come here. I got real quiet on me. Let me explain this to you further. And now we're going to get back into Einstein a little bit. I was like, look, I don't know if you know this, and most kids don't when I was talking to them, but there are 8 different learning styles, right? I said, at most, schools only teach it from 3. So if your learning language was one of the other 5 styles, but you're only learning from 3, you're not gonna fit in. You're gonna feel like a fish out of water. And the place that's making you feel like a fish out of water, that's telling you to climb this tree, you're gonna hate it. So I said, let's talk about the 3 learning styles. The 3 learning styles that most schools teach from is either from verbal, audio. Well, actually, verbal and audio are the same thing. Verbal meaning like what we're doing right now. I'm talking, you're listening, and hopefully you're processing information. But then there's the audio, there's the visual too. I keep wanting to go to audio. There's the visual.
Mm-hmm.
Visual learner has to see things in order to understand it. And I feel like actually, when I heard you talking about YouTube, like I think I know what 2 of your learning styles might be. One might be visual, right? And I'll get into the other one in a second. The last learning style that schools teach from is the logical or the left brain style, where people process math well.
Mm.
So if you're a right brain thinker, and I believe that Einstein was a right brain thinker because he thought outside of the box. His view of the world was illogical to a lot of his professors and teachers, right? But he unlocked some secrets of physics that are still being proven today as we get the most recent telescopes looking all the way out into the ends of space. His theories are still proven to be sound because he thought differently, right? So I said, look, if you don't have these 3 styles as a learning approach, then you're literally receiving information and it's getting lost in translation. You're like, I don't understand what y'all are saying, but you're making it seem like I'm supposed to understand it. I don't feel like I fit in here. I hate this place. And so I said, let me tell you some of the other learning styles. I was like, maybe you are an expeditionary or exploratory learner. That just simply means that you got to learn with your hands. You got to touch stuff in order to process it. But every time you go to touch something, you're told, hey, keep your hands to yourself. And you're like, well, dang. Or maybe you are a kinesthetic learner, which means you got to move to process information. But every time you get up to move around, hey, sit down, be still. Dang. And then the other, like I'm not gonna go through all 5, but the other one is clearly the opposite side of the left brain thinker is the right brain thinker, the creative. But if you're never given a chance to express your creativity, in drawing, hey, you're drawing, you daydreaming, stop, focus on what's going on here, then now you are going to be that fish out of water, and you're going to come to hate the place that makes you feel like that every day. But here's the other part of the equation. I was like, look, if you understand that your learning style is your tool, is your talent, and instead of running away from this broken system of the school, you ran towards it and said, hey, look, I'm gonna turn my learning style into a teaching style. Now what's going to happen is when there's other people with the same learning style that you're teaching, they're not going to feel like a fish out of water anymore. They're like, I don't understand what he's saying. Now the system is being fixed because the missing components, the missing learning styles, you're now supplementing it with your presence. Instead of being like, I hate school, I'm gonna stay as far away as I can from it. No, you're going to go in as the solution, as part of the solution. And when more people do that, you're now fixing the solution and not just leaving it broken for somebody else to fix. Some other person that has genius can fix that. Like, no, you have it. Like, I don't know about you, Miles, but I think that's like a game changer.
That is a game changer. Even when you say 8 learning styles, I'm like, what?
The same lady who asked me if I played basketball, she got really hyped when I mentioned this to these young men last week. She was like, none of them know their learning style. She was like, why aren't we assessing what their learning style is? I'm like, I don't know. It's really easy. There are tests all out there where you can just take a 15-minute test and figure out what your learning style is. And then you can advocate for yourself and say, hey, look, I learned this way. Is there any way that I can, I've had people come on this interview and say, hey, look, I was a kinesthetic learner. And when my teacher realized that, she allowed me to move around, and it made a difference in my education. She didn't let everybody move around the classroom because everybody's not a kinesthetic learner. But one dude was in a charter school. So charter schools do things a little differently, but the typical public school is not going to allow room for that. And we say, no child left behind, but we're leaving children behind in droves because we're not equipped. The school is not equipped to have the teachers to interact with the students at the same learning style. So, that's not just relevant in the school system. That's relevant anywhere where there's people involved and there's systems. There are people who are marginalized, who feel left out on their jobs because how they operate, how they function is not being supported. Like, hey, you need to get on this, what's it called? You get on a probation period. Like, yeah, you need to get on this plan that's going to help you improve your performance. But it's not about improving their performance. It's about acclimating their performance to the mechanism that's already in place instead of creating something new for them to thrive. Like, I thoroughly believe that a lot of athletes are kinesthetic learners, and that's why they have such success on the field and on the court, because they're allowed to process information in real time while they're moving. And they're like, yeah, I'm at where I need to be. And we got to recognize that.
Right.
So, I mean, I feel like I've been talking a little bit too much though, man. Like, how is this hitting you?
No, man, I appreciate all that. I appreciate that story and all this info, man. It's eye-opening to me. A lot of things that you said. I even as you were talking, I was just evaluating myself. I'm like, man, in school, I was thinking about what type of student I was, what I do now, like what are some of the tools that I have now, what I think I'm really, really good at. There was a long period of time when I didn't think that I was good at anything, but now I feel like, I was just telling my wife the other day, I really think I'm good at a lot of things, and I've never like recognized it before, and yeah, it's definitely interesting looking at the approach of passion, looking at the things that you hate, because I never really associate that type of thing. I never associate passion with that sort of mentality of things that you hate. It's funny. I look at Jesus. I'm like, yeah, Jesus was very passionate about. And when I think of Jesus' passion, I'm like, yo, wait a minute. He was, that's crazy. He was he hates injustice. He really loved the poor. And he just did not stand for, people being mistreated. And I was like, yo, that's insane.
No punk. We try to make him look like this.
Right.
Like this dude flipped tables.
Right. He was flipping tables.
Yeah.
When they were selling stuff in the temple courts. I'm like, man.
Not only was he flipping tables, like if you read the right scripture, he had a cord. He was whipping.
Yeah, he made a cord.
Like, yo, get out of here, making my father's house a den of thieves, right? Yes. Sorry, I don't mean that.
That's passion. Yeah, I get hyped too. I'm like, man, that's passion for real. And but yeah, it's definitely a different way of thinking, and and that's something that I'm definitely going to be thinking about a lot more, because now that I think about it, it's like, all right, I know what I'm passionate about, like stuff that I hate, and I'm slowly discovering like some of the tools that I have, which could be my ability to search for knowledge, my ability to research things, my ability to explore, my exploratory maybe I'm an exploratory learner,
I literally wrote that down for you when you started talking about. I think that people who are in the music booth, the AV booth, are good at being exploratory, expeditionary, because you got to have your hands on things all the time. You're moving. And
right.
I wrote that down. Like, I think he's an expeditionary learner, and you being where you are and doing what you've done speaks to that. And
yeah, for sure.
You, like I said, I think you're visual because YouTube has allowed you to be able to put, because like as you're watching YouTube, I'm sure you got your hands on something like, okay, real time, I'm putting it together, I'm doing this and the third. And so yeah, you're tapping into your learning styles that weren't explored or weren't identified while you were in secondary and post-secondary schooling. Not explicit enough for you to come out like, yeah, this is who I am and this is what my strength is.
Right, right. Yeah, and that's 100% because I'm like, man. And I think there's something to say about like hearing it and like affirming it.
It is.
Because like now I feel like there's a lot more that I want to explore on this subject.
Yeah.
Like so much more. I'm like, man, like what else am I passionate about that I'm just like don't think about on a regular basis? I mean, that what I spoke about earlier was the first thing that came to mind, but like if I really sat down and meditated on these things, it's like, all right, what else am I passionate about?
Yeah.
And how can I, use these tools that I have to do something about it and land that purpose, So
I have several things that I hate, Miles. This is not about me, but when you begin to really take inventory, you'll be like, yo, I hate this, and this. I'm gonna tell you one thing. I'm gonna make this about me for like a second.
yeah,
Bill,
for sure, for sure.
on his podcast, like he always put it back on himself. I'm like, dude, stop talking about yourself. Anyway, you met me in my passion.
Hmm.
I could not stand for people to be being taken advantage of in financial aid because they didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mind saying it. I thrived at it. I was like, yo, I'm gonna research this for you. I'm gonna make sure to get these resources in your hand. This is you should not be struggling like this. And I just felt like it was a system that was set up for people to fail. And I was like, if I can be a person that can help make sense of this so that you can matriculate and not come out in debt, then I felt like I was doing a thing. And so that's one of my passions. Like just the way the whole federal aid game is set up, and the whole, post-second, everybody should be able to have access to go to school beyond high school if they want to, and it shouldn't be predicated upon whether or not you have money.
Exactly.
So yeah, you met me in one of my passions.
Nice. That's comforting to know. That's good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's yeah, my mind is racing about all this stuff. I'm like, man.
Can I throw something else in there though?
Hey, do it. Let's go.
The other thing that I wrote down about you, Miles, and you have to confirm or deny this. I believe that you are a tinkerer. Like you're a person who has always put their hands on stuff and tried to figure it out. And I believe that if you even look at your family, you'll see that there were other people. There might have been a mechanic in your family. There might have been other people who when they put their hands on something like, oh yeah, you need something fixed, go see such and such, right? They can put you on, right? So can you confirm or deny that? Are you a tinkerer?
I'm 100% a tinkerer. I've actually, especially since I bought a home, especially since I bought a home, I tinker for real. Like, yeah, I will try everything. Like literally will try everything, try to fix everything. And my hand is in literally everything before I call somebody else to do it for me.
Yeah, man. So now I'm getting a picture of, when Iron Man, are you a fan of Marvel movies?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, whenever, Tony Stark had like a 3D representation for everything when he would design something, right? Before he would go into 3D printing, he had this 3D, he would like open up and he would have this thing, it would expand.
Right, they would expand up, yeah.
He could pick apart the components and then, okay, this works, this doesn't work, and put it back together. And I see that in you. Like, yeah, don't let me get my hands on the thing and be able to take it apart, because I'm gonna be able to put it back together, and I'll be able to put it back together with it performing better than it did before.
Yep.
So here's what I see. Here's how I see your genius playing out. And there's plenty of different ways this can play out, because really what it is, Miles, it's like a puzzle. I tell people all the time, even though all this is like revelation and it begins to make sense, it might take a little while to put the pieces of the puzzle together and have it really click, right? And so one of the ways that I think that your puzzle may come together and click is I see you building a platform for people, because I heard you say this earlier, building platforms for people that they can do podcasts like this, but begin to address things like, hey, are you an expert that knows about diabetes? Do you need a podcast? Just offering people the platform to just say, hey, look, I will put together the platform for you. Don't worry about the mechanics of what it takes to have a podcast, to do a Zoom like this, but I'm just going to create something for you to get the word out to the people so that they know the stumbling blocks, they know the access, they know the resources that can make managing diabetes more attainable for people.
I can dig that.
Yeah. And in truth, when you begin to identify the other things that you hate, I see you as a person that can just go out there and find these subject. Another word for genius is a subject matter expert.
Right.
So maybe SBE. So maybe you see yourself as somebody like, I don't know that I can be a host for a show. You don't have to be the host for the show. You can just be the person that provides a host with a platform to address many different things. So you look out and find the subject matter expert on diabetes. You look out and find the subject matter expert on big pharma and how to navigate that. You find the subject matter expert on all the different things that you hate, but maybe they're just people. The thing about genius is you got to match up your 9 with somebody else's 0 and vice versa. And look, you have a strength in this, but you don't know how to make a platform. I can do that for you. I'm not that great at maybe articulating the information so that the masses can consume it, but you do. So that's, if we come together and bring our geniuses together, we can do a thing as a unit that we could not do separately. That's where genius begins, because genius is never about lifting yourself up and being like haughty about it. It's like, hey, look, I do a thing well. And then where does somebody else do a thing well? How can we build something that then affects the masses around us and makes people's lives better for it? I'm gonna let it marinate.
Oh no, it makes perfect sense. And like in the spirit of Kwanzaa, it's all that celebrate. We on Ujima, day 3.
Okay.
That's a collective responsibility and stuff like that. It's I think what you said about putting our 0s and 9s together is important as well, because we'll never be a master of everything.
No.
Like you said in the beginning, nobody's gonna be a genius at everything. And in order to, I think one of our purposes as human beings is to put our geniuses together so that we can thrive as the human race, if you will. And and like I was saying, in the spirit of Kwanzaa, it's especially important for us as African Americans to, use our resources together in order to be lifted up. So I think that togetherness is definitely important.
What you're saying is powerful, man. I agree 100%, because the world is broken because there are not more of us who are equipped enough to say, I have something to contribute to fix it. You got to stop looking for the net, like somebody else fixed that. Like, no, you do it.
Right.
And you do it to the strength and capacity that you have. But then when you exceed your capacity, partner up with somebody else. And yes, the world will be a better place when we all can self-affirm. I have genius on the inside of me that I'm going to release, because then it also inspires somebody else to be great at something too. Like, man, how are you doing that? Well, look, passion, talent, purpose, understanding that, and just spreading this message. This is what I'm doing one-on-one, is just trying to spread this message and light people's fire, light people's candle, and be like, you got something on the inside of you, bro, that nobody else has. There may be somebody that's afflicted the same way you were afflicted, but they don't have the same talent as you. And so you're going to come at it from a different angle that they can't come from. And that's good. That improves us as a whole. So,
absolutely.
I'm glad it just hit, man. I felt that it would.
Yeah, it's definitely hitting. I love this. I love what you're doing, man. Like for real. This is very important. Very, very important. And, for the simple fact that people just don't have access to stuff like this and knowledge about stuff like this is it's a great hindrance on people in general, It
is. I agree. So look, man, I'm gonna land this plane the same way that we took off by just asking you again, Miles, do you consider yourself to be a genius?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's what I want to hear, man. Because look, it's my uncommon cue to see the genius in you. So I want to thank you for coming on, spending some time with me, chopping it up. my Suitland High School alumni, fellow compatriot. But this
Thanks
has
for
been
having me.
Reggie. Yeah, man. Thank you again. Thank you for being on. I am Reggie Key, your host for Inkwell Spoken Presents Common Genius, Uncommon Destiny. And this has been my genius guest, Miles Kenneth.
Thanks for joining us for this week's episode. Make sure you pick up the book, Common Genius, Uncommon Destiny, by my dad, Reggie Legend, available on Amazon and at inkwellspoken.com. Connect with us at Inkwell Spoken on all social media platforms. If you enjoy our content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload.